good evening, my fellow degenerates. Or good morning, if you're the type who wakes up immediately and starts thinking about werewolves, which, honestly, respect. Today we're diving into a subject that has haunted humanity for centuries. Not just in the shadows of the night, but in the darkest corners of our thirstiest thoughts. That's right, we're talking about werewolves, the original, dangerous, but sexy bad boys. Once upon a time, these beasts were stuff of nightmares, stalking medieval villages, terrorizing peasants, and occasionally getting burned at the stake. But somewhere along the way, they went from being horrifying creatures to hot, brooding, aggressively shirtless love interests. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how that happened. So grab a drink, lock up your livestock, and let's sink our teeth into the lewd history of werewolves. Let's get into it, shall we? Well, let's start this one off at the beginning, shall we? Before werewolves were sexy, before they were tragic, and before they were the subject of some very questionable internet searches, back in ancient times, if you turned into a wolf, it wasn't because you had irresistible primal instincts. It was because the gods were pissed at you. Take King Lycaon, the first recorded dumbass to get himself werewolfed. Greek mythology tells us that this guy thought it'd be so funny to serve Zeus a nice home-cooked meal, made out of human flesh, of course. Because testing the patience of a god who throws lightning for fun is always a great idea. Zeus took one bite and said absolutely the fuck not, and turned Lycaon into a wolf. Now, some versions of the story say that this was purely punishment for cannibalism. Others, well, they suggest Lycaon was engaging in other beastly behaviors. You know, the kind that makes Zeus go, "All right, you want to act like an animal? Fine, now you are one." But hey, at least Lycaon got a cool transformation out of it. Meanwhile, the Norse berserker warriors who wore wolf pelts and went into battle foaming at the mouth, usually high on mushrooms and probably fully erect from all the bloodlust, well, historians debate whether these guys were actual werewolves or just the most intense LARP session in history. But one thing is certain. If a Viking charges at you naked except for a wolfskin, screaming about Valhalla, well, you're absolutely fucked. In every way possible. So yeah, early werewolves, not sexy, just kinda murdery. Don't worry, we're only a few centuries away from people deciding, hey, what if this terrifying beast was also daddy material? Moving on to our second spot, we've got medieval werewolves, sin, sex, and Satan's furry army. Fast forward to medieval Europe, where everything was either a sin, a punishment for a sin, or caused by Satan himself, and guess what? Werewolves checked all three boxes. Back then, if you were accused of being a werewolf, it wasn't because you had main character energy, it was because the local priest thought you were out there doing unholy things. And by unholy, I mean exactly what you're thinking. That's right, medieval people generally believed that some dudes were out in the woods getting it on with wolves. I'd love to say they were wrong, but history has shown us humans will try to fuck just about anything. And the church, well, they hated werewolves. To them, it was all witchcraft, demonic possession, and sinful horniness. So if your neighbor saw you sneaking into the forest too often, or worse, you were a little too hairy, well, congrats, you're now a werewolf, and a heretic, and very flammable. One of the spiciest cases was Gilles Garnier, a Frenchman convicted in the 1570s for werewolf attacks. This guy was accused of tearing through local kids like a medieval DoorDash order. But was he actually a werewolf? No. He was just an absolutely feral dude living in the woods. Which honestly, in this economy, totally relatable. Meanwhile, over in Germany, Peter Stump, aka the Werewolf of Bedburg, confessed under torture to being a werewolf, killing livestock, eating children, and having relations with a she-wolf. Yeah, relations. As in, what that snout do, babe? Now, Was he actually guilty of any of this? Or did he just fold under the medieval equivalent of enhanced interrogation techniques? Well, who's to say? Let's be honest. If anyone's making love to the moonlit beast, it's not the werewolf, it's the dude accusing him. So in summary, if you're a hairy guy with bad luck in medieval Europe, you were either burned as a witch, executed as a werewolf, or, if you were really lucky, just labeled that weird dude in the woods. But don't worry, all you werewolf lovers out there, things are about to get so much thirstier. Let's move on to the next one. The Victorian era. A magical time when people were so repressed they could see a table leg and need to lie down for a minute. But you know what they didn't repress? Their absolute, undeniable thirst for monsters. Enter the werewolf glow-up, if you will. You see, medieval werewolves were out there ripping people to shreds and getting executed for satanic bestiality. But the Victorians, well, they said, okay, but what if they're hot? You see, this was the era of gothic horror, when authors were out here writing dark, brooding books about men with mysterious pasts and dangerous auras, and definitely too many abs. And the werewolf, well, he was a perfect fit. He was strong, he was cursed, and most importantly, he was barely holding back his primal urges. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's the 1800s version of I'm not like other guys. One of the first big sexy werewolf stories was The Werewolf in 1839 by Clemens Hausmann. It had a beautiful but deadly she-wolf seduction and an ending so tragic you just knew the Victorian readers clutched their pearls and whispered, "Scandalous." But let's be real, they were eating it up. Then you had Guy Endor's The Werewolf of Paris in 1933, which was basically Dracula but furrier and way more unhinged. It had sex, gore, and a werewolf protagonist who was so into it he made modern fanfic look subtle. Victorian readers pretended to be shocked, but between you and me, they were absolutely into it. This was the start of the tragic, sexy monster trend, where werewolves stopped being just terrifying beasts and started being doomed lovers with ripped muscles and deep-seated trauma. And let's be honest, trauma? Well, kind of makes them hotter, don't it? So yeah, blame the Victorians. They're the reason werewolves stopped being creatures of the night and started being creatures you'd absolutely risk it all for. And from here, things only get filthier. Moving on up to modern times, and at this point, werewolves have gone from monstrous abominations to walking sex symbols. And let's be real, we were all complicit in this. The second Hollywood got involved, werewolves stopped being terrifying beasts of the night and started being hot, brooding bad boys with a tragic backstory and six-pack abs. And when did this shift really kick off? Well, the 20th century, baby. Once movies got their paws on werewolves, they went from mangy beasts to dangerously attractive gym bros with anger issues. Case in point, The Wolfman from 1941. The first real werewolf blockbuster. It gave us the whole tragic trope of the werewolf curse. You know, it's where a guy gets bitten, turns into a wolf, and spends the rest of the movie whining about it. Honestly, it's relatable, but this is just the beginning. Fast forward to the 80s, and suddenly werewolves are ripped. The Howling, An American Werewolf in London. These were movies that had practical effects that turned painful, violent transformations into something that still made people say, yeah, it's gross, but he's still kind of hot though. Then came the 90s and the 2000s, and listen, this is when werewolves officially became the red flag boyfriend of the supernatural world. Let's talk about Underworld from 2003 for a second. You remember Lucian, right? The werewolf rebel leader? Well, he was shirtless, sweaty, covered in scars, and had a toxic X energy before it was even a term. And did the women hate it? No, they absolutely did not. Then, of course, we had Twilight from 2008, which gave us Jacob Black. The werewolf bimbo with impossibly defined abs and a personality of an aggressively loyal golden retriever. Say what you want about the series, but it single-handedly made an entire generation look at werewolves and say, yes, please. And let's not forget Teen Wolf from 2011, a show where werewolves weren't just Jack, they were practically walking Abercrombie models. At this point, Hollywood wasn't even pretending anymore. Werewolves weren't the scary monsters, they were thirst traps. Now, modern werewolves follow one of three rules. They're either A, brutally hot and emotionally unavailable, B, brutally hot and passive as hell, or C, brutally hot and will absolutely call you their mate in a voice that makes you question everything. And if you're wondering why we as a society got here, the answer is simple. Because we wanted it. The people have spoken. And they said, give me a 6'5" unhinged werewolf who could break my spine and then apologize softly afterward. So here we are. Werewolves used to be monsters. Now, well, they're the ultimate bad boy fantasy. And honestly, I can't say there's a lot of women out there complaining. And moving on to the fifth and final segment for today, we've got the future of werewolves. At this point, werewolf thirst isn't just a problem, it's a full-blown pandemic. We started with terrifying folklore beasts, and now we're 2 steps away from Werewolf Boyfriend DLC ruining our economy. And what do I think's coming down the line? Well, let me tell you. Number 1, I think we're going to have AI-generated werewolf daddies. Give it a few years and you'll have a fully immersive Growl Hub subscription complete with customizable werewolf lovers who can call you mate in 50 different accents. Society will crumble, no one will shower, and the only job openings will probably be for full moon tech support. Number 2, well, science will probably end up making real werewolves. CRISPR's out there making glow-in-the-dark rats, so don't act shocked when some billionaire decides to accidentally turn himself into an 8-foot-tall apex predator. The second it works, well, y'all are selling your kidneys to get in on the bite package. We'll have a werewolf influencer era as well, and nobody will be safe from thirst trap transformation videos then. And last but not least, werewolf media is about to get wholly unholy. We went from scary monsters to shirtless bad boys to Hollywood blatantly targeting our kinks. We're one movie away from Alpha Daddy 3000, The Reckoning, where the entire plot is just 90 minutes of growling, lifting, and staring deep into your soul. And the worst part? Y'all are going to eat it up. The future isn't just hairy, folks. It's downright filthy. And honestly, I respect it. Well, I suppose that's enough monster thirst for one day, or at least until you end up doom-scrolling werewolf fanfic at 3 a.m. wondering how your life led you there. No shame, I respect a dedicated researcher of feral romance, trust me. But let's be real. Werewolves stopped being scary the second Hollywood realized people wanted less bloodthirsty beast and more alpha daddy with anger issues. Now they're just walking, talking red flags with fangs and a slight breeding kink. So if a suspiciously hot, ridiculously jacked guy ever growls that you should stay away because he's dangerous, well, congrats, you're in a werewolf story. And let's be honest, you're not staying away. You're making terrible decisions and you're going to love every second of it. If you enjoyed this very educational deep dive into historical monster thirst, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Tell me what's your favorite werewolf trope. Tragic bad boy, unhinged beast, or just a massive growling problem. No judgment, just scientific curiosity. But as always, stay loud, stay lewd, stay furry, my friends. We'll catch you in the next video.